So first thing, you gotta have to know the diagram. Here's a big version. This would be sticking in like so. Remember, this apex, this point, always points left. Some vessels I want to point out while we got this model in my hand. The red vessels that are on the surface of the heart. Pull that door too for me, Mike. No, this is what they're doing. These red vessels on the surface, and notice they go all the way around. Those are called the coronary arteries. Those are the arteries that do what? Coronary arteries, what do? They feed the heart. Those are the arteries that give the heart blood or give it oxygen, give it nutrients, get rid of its waste. Those are the ones that if they get stopped up, you have what? Heart attack. You should know the word coronary arteries. Their partners, the vessels you see in blue along the surface of the heart, they're the cardiac veins. So coronary arteries take blood to the heart for it to use. Cardiac veins take it and put it back with the rest of the blood. It's a pair. So we're talking about cardiac veins, coronary arteries. A couple of other vessels just to point out. This big horseshoe-shaped vessel up top here, that's the aorta. It's the biggest artery in your body. Pretty much every artery in your body branches off of that one. A couple of exceptions, but most of them. It's like the main interstate. And which way do arteries always carry blood? Away from the heart. The two biggest veins in your body are the superior and inferior vena cavas. Those are like the interstate of veins. Pretty much all your other veins branch off of those two. Veins always carry blood which way? To the heart. Arteries usually carry what kind of blood? What kind of blood? Arteries carry what kind of blood? Oxygenated, almost always. Veins usually carry deoxygenated. That's why the veins are in blue and the arteries are in red with two exceptions. This artery right here, that's an artery. It's in blue. It's the pulmonary artery. What do we say pulmonary stands for? Lungs. It's carrying deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs where it will get oxygenated. And then these, the other exception are these guys, the pulmonary veins. Notice they're in red. They bring blood back from the lungs to the heart. It's already been oxygenated. It's been at the lungs. All right, so let's move on a little further here. We talked already about the functions of the blood. We know it transports your nutrients. What organ, at what digestive organ do nutrients move from the digestive system into the blood? Small intestine. That's where absorption and most digestion happen. Carries dissolved gases, also carries hormones, does other stuff too, obviously. We know that we have a closed circulatory system, that our blood never leaves our blood vessels. It's a closed loop. We have basically 5 types of blood vessels. Arteries branch to smaller vessels called arterioles. Those branch into these little capillary beds that are very narrow and thin. What happens in capillaries? Exchange of stuff. Gas exchange, nutrient exchange, waste exchange. Capillaries are where the blood actually does its work. They're all over your body. Eventually those merge back together to form venules, which then merge back together to form veins and head back toward what? The heart. It's a closed loop. Remember that some things like insects, arthropods, and also mollusks like snails and slugs and octopus and squid, their system is open. A heart, a couple of blood vessels. When that heart pumps, the blood shoots out and basically bathes the organ in the blood bath. Very different than our system, not nearly as efficient as our system. Also remember some things about arteries and veins. Arteries can be very thick, the walls. Have a lot of collagen in them. What do we know about collagen? Holds us together. It's a thick protein, part of your connective tissues. Very strong, It's also elastic because they're carrying blood coming from the heart, which means there's a lot of flight behind it, a lot of pressure. So it needs to be stretchy, strong. Veins, on the other hand, have the blood's already been around the circuit. So what's happened to most of the pressure along the way? It's been lost, it's been dissipated, so the blood's not moving with a lot of pressure. So vein walls tend to be pretty thin. They don't really need to be elastic. There's not much pressure going through them. And they have valves because there's so little pressure that there's a tendency for the blood to want to what? Go backward against gravity or with gravity. So the valves keep the blood going one way, so we don't have a backflow. That would be bad if blood started going backwards. We don't want it to go backwards. Let's see. I do want to point out one word on this screen here. Your blood vessels have an inner lining that's very smooth to keep what from happening? Clots. It also has a wall. Your blood vessels have a wall of smooth muscle, which is muscle you can't do what with? Control voluntarily, consciously, right? But it's an unconscious kind of muscle that can do this, and that's an important word to note. Peristalsis. What's peristalsis? No, it's when it's like wave-like contractions. So the walls of the blood vessels are doing like a wave. What are they doing as they're doing the wave? Pushing the blood. The actual blood vessels do like the worm almost, right? And they push the blood up through. What other part of your body does peristalsis? Your digestive tract, like the esophagus and your small intestine. When the muscles in the walls of those organs do this wave-like pattern, it pushes food through the digestive system. Know that word. That's an important word to know, peristalsis. Here we see the capillary bed. What did we say all this green stuff was around the blood vessels? Those are lymph vessels. Their job is to capture what that's leaked out of the blood? Fluid, like water, mostly water. Eventually, up here in your chest, what's going to happen with that fluid? It's going to go back in the blood. But before it does, what happens to it? It gets filtered at what structures that are part of the lymph system? Which you've all heard of before. It's the lymph nodes. What's found in high concentrations in lymph nodes that do the filtering, white blood cells. Most of your white blood cells are actually not in your blood. Most of your white blood cells are in your lymph. The fluid that's leaked out of the blood vessels, they capture it, put it back into the bloodstream, up in the chest. There's an open circulatory system. There's a closed one, earthworms, much like ours. We talked a little bit about blood pressure. And we said that the word systole, it's an important word to note. Systole is when the bottom chambers of your heart contract. What are those bottom chambers called? The bottom two chambers of your heart, called ventricles. When they contract, that's called systole. They're the big, strong chambers. So what's going to happen to your blood pressure when these two big parts down here at the bottom contract? It's going to go up because they're pushing. So that's when your blood pressure becomes its highest. That's the top number in your blood pressure. It's called systolic pressure. It's usually around 120. It's the pressure mostly due to the left ventricle because the left one is way stronger than the right one. We'll talk about fly in a minute. Refresh your memory on that. But you should know systolic pressure is the top number in your blood pressure. It's usually around 120. It could be a little higher. It could be a little lower. 120 is sort of an average. And then the bottom number happens during what's called diastole. Diastole is when those ventricles are, guess what? Relaxing. And so you got contraction, systole, diastole, relaxation. So the pressure drops way down. The diastolic pressure is usually around 70. Maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower, but it should be much less than the systolic. When doctors get really worried about somebody's blood pressure, it's when those two numbers get close together, systolic and diastolic. Because what's not happening if they're close together? Heart's not pumping. Because what makes fluids move through a pipe? Not just pressure, a difference in pressure. Okay? Pressure difference makes fluids move. There has to be a higher pressure in one place and a lower pressure in another, right? If your heart didn't, if this didn't work, if these two pressures weren't different, it would move. Your blood would just sit there. Diastolic is the pressure when your ventricles relax. Some things that affect blood pressure. We mentioned nicotine, I think, last time. What did we say nicotine can do to a lot of your blood vessels in your body? Nicotine can make your blood vessels go. What do we call that? Vasoconstriction, right? Make them get smaller. Well, you still got the same amount of blood, but now you've got smaller blood vessels. What has to happen when your blood vessels go that way to your blood pressure? It has to go up, because the same amount of blood has to go through them. So nicotine can help to contribute to high blood pressure. Other drugs like alcohol cause that to happen. Vasodilation. What effect can that have on your blood pressure? It can make you go down, right? Bigger pipes, same amount of blood, the pressure can drop. Think about a hose pipe. If you had a little bitty hose pipe and you turn your faucet on high, how's the water going to spray out? It's going to spray. You got a little bitty hose pipe, the pressure's going to be high. On the other hand, a wider hose pipe, the same amount of water is going to come out, but does it need to shoot out the way it is in that little one? Nope. It can come out in a more gentle flow. Same kind of thing here. All right, a little bit about the inside of the heart. It's made of cardiac muscle. There's three kinds of muscle. Skeletal muscle, which is the kind we can consciously control, right? Makes our bones move. That's why it's called skeletal. Smooth, which makes up most of what? Smooth makes up almost all your organs, and it makes up the walls of your blood vessels. It's the kind you can't consciously control, right? And then there's this guy, cardiac muscle. Only found in the heart. The cool thing about it is it's self-stimulating, which means it doesn't need what to make it beat. Doesn't need a nerve. It stimulates itself to contract. It's got a built-in what? It's the thing that makes it beat. You've all heard of. Some people have to get this replaced. A pacemaker. It's got a built-in pacemaker that basically shocks it and tells it, hey, it's time to beat, time to beat, time to beat, time to beat, time to beat. Helps to keep rhythm. It's like the Mr. Souter of your heart, right? Keeps the rhythm. The band director, right? Keeps the rhythm. Keeps the rhythm.
So is something wrong with your pacemaker, heart muscle?
No. Heart murmur is the valves leaking. And we'll talk about that as we go here. All right. The heart is surrounded by a membrane called the pericardium. You ought to be able to figure that out just by looking at the word. Peri means around, right? So it's around the heart. A membrane around the heart. Our heart, mammal hearts, and also bird hearts have 4 chambers. 4 chambers are good. They're the best. Because what do 4 chambers let us do? Basically, it lets us have 2 separate hearts in one. One side of our heart, the left side, is about pumping around what kind of blood? The left side pumps around oxygenated blood to the whole body. The right side of your heart, on the other hand, pumps around deoxygenated blood from your heart to where? To your lungs. So basically you keep them separated, which means your tissues get lots of what? Oxygen, because the oxygenated blood and the deoxygenated blood are separated. What groups of vertebrates have 3-chambered hearts? Reptiles and amphibians. Their blood mixes. They don't get as much oxygen per blood cell. And then fish have how many chambers in their hearts? Just 2. Their system's pretty different than ours. All right, also remember our 2 sides are separated by a wall. It's called the septum. Same thing you have in your nose. Dividing wall, right and left. And don't forget that word, coronary arteries. Those are the arteries that give blood to your heart for it itself to use. If they get clogged up, that's when you get a heart attack. Is that what you mean? Okay. All right, now where we left off last session was talking about the blood flow, the order blood flows through the heart. You got to know this. You should be able to put these in order. When we have the test on this heart stuff, this will be a question. And each part will be a question. So this is like 14 questions, putting them in order. So it's a circle. Remember, we've got a closed circulatory system. So the blood could start really anywhere. I'm going to take this heart apart that I have here in my hand, so you can kind of see what's going on here. All right, now remember, the heart would sit like this. Point always points left. Apex, the point. Like it's in me. So we could start at any point in the heart. Let's start up here in the left atrium. Atria are the top chambers. So we've got a blood cell up here in the left atrium. So in our list right here, left atrium. The atria, they don't do much pumping. Their job is to what? Notice they're kind of small. Here's the right atrium, left atrium, kind of small. They're just like receivers. They're like the doors into your heart. They receive the blood. They're not made to pump. They just let the blood in. All right, so blood cell starts out in the left atrium. When blood comes into the left atrium will then contract, and it'll push the blood through here. And you can see where my finger's at there. There's a little valve right there. That valve is called the bicuspid. Sometimes it's called the mitral valve. Some of you probably have a leaky heart murmur there. It means this valve leaks a little bit. Because after the blood comes through, what's going to happen to that valve? It's going to close to keep what from happening? Blood from going from left ventricle back to left atrium. Sometimes you have a little leak there, and doctor can hear it. It sounds like a gurgle when they're listening to your heart. That's a heart murmur. Usually it's not something serious unless it's really leaky. Now if it becomes really leaky, that's a problem. Yeah?
Older younger brother relative aortic stenosis, so one of the valves?
Yes. It can have to do with,
Which valve?
it could have to do with any of them. It's hard to say. Hard to say. But anyway, bicuspid to left ventricle. Now I want you to notice the walls of this left ventricle are strong and thick. Because when this thing pumps, the blood is going to get pumped through this valve, which you can see up here. That's called the aortic valve. And the blood is going to go into this big old aorta up here. Where do we say the aorta goes? Everywhere. It runs right down through here. Following my tie, straight down. All your arteries branch off of it. So left ventricle through the aortic valve into the aorta, which will lead to all your body's tissues. It'll go everywhere. It's taking oxygenated blood everywhere. I mean, it's happening all the time. That's constantly happening. Now, how long it takes one blood cell to go from all the way around that loop, I can't tell you. But it's not very long. All right, once it goes to the tissues, it's eventually going to hit a bed of what? Capillaries, where it's going to lose what? It's going to lose pressure, and it's going to lose oxygen. It's going to pick up what? If it's losing oxygen, what's it going to pick up? What other gaseous waste? Oxygen and CO2, right? It's going to lose oxygen, gain CO2, and it's going to continue to move through the body. Eventually, it's ready to make its loop back toward the heart. So it goes through a system of capillaries, venules, veins, and eventually all those veins dump back into one of these two big veins. The superior vena cava, which is up here. Means superior just means what? At the top. Above the heart. Or this one down here, inferior vena cava. Either one of those two, they both come back to the heart. They bring the blood back to the right side, which is, remember, the right side is the deoxygenated side. And it goes into this right atrium, right up here. From the right atrium, it's going to contract, and it's going to push the blood through this little thing right here. See where my finger's at there? Another valve. That valve is called the tricuspid valve. So the right atrium and the right ventricle are separated by this little guy right here, the tricuspid valve. So the blood goes right atrium, tricuspid, right ventricle. Well, that's what we got. It's just a list. It's a circle. It's a circle. We could, well, I got a picture. I'm going to show you a picture. But right ventricle, it's going to pump. And we said the right side of your heart is about sending blood to where? The lung. So when the right ventricle contracts, the blood gets pumped through another valve, which is really hard to see in this model. Not even going to try to, well, it's not so bad. It's right here. It's called the pulmonary valve. And from the pulmonary valve, the blood goes into the pulmonary artery. Remember, pulmonary means lungs. Notice that pulmonary artery is blue, because what kind of blood is getting pumped? Deoxygenated. It's going to the lungs, where it will get what? Oxygenated. And then it's going to head back to the heart through these guys. Now this is pulmonary vein. There's actually more than one. You can see them back here in the back, red. There should be some over on this other side too. The pulmonary veins will carry the blood back to where we started, the left atrium. So this is just a list, but it's a circle. I could say start at the right atrium and tell me the order that things go in. I could say start at the aorta and tell me the order the blood moves in. It's a circle. You just need to know the order of things. So I'll go to a picture, show you the picture. Watch this. This kind of walks you through it step by step. We'll let it get to a certain point. We'll start talking about it as it goes here. I'm gonna let it. So coming into the right atrium, yeah, that's fast. Let me get ready to talk fast here. All right, coming from superior and inferior vena cava, right atrium, tricuspid valve, right ventricle, pulmonary artery. I can't keep up, okay? Let's go to a non-moving picture. Back through here. Let's just start at the right atrium this time. We'll make this be number one. Right atrium. Tricuspid valve. We'll make that be number two. Right ventricle. Number three. From the right ventricle, the blood is going to get pumped out through here. That is the pulmonary valve. Into the pulmonary artery. To the lungs. At the lungs, it's going to pick up its oxygen. And it's going to come back to the heart through these guys. Now, these pulmonary veins, it looks like they're going into both sides of the heart. They're not. This side wraps around and dumps into here. So pulmonary veins to left atrium, through this guy, the bicuspid valve or mitral valve.
So what you said pulmonary veins
to left atrium.
Wait, what about the pulmonary veins?
The lungs.
Okay. And
then from the bicuspid valve to the left ventricle. from the left ventricle, it's going to go out through this valve right here, which is the aortic valve, into this big guy right here, the aorta, which is going to carry the blood everywhere, the whole body. That's where it will exchange all its gases and nutrients and stuff. And then it's ready to come back. It comes back to the heart, through the veins, eventually through the two biggest veins in your body, the inferior and superior vena cava, where it will go back to where we started, the right atrium. So go back to the list. You just need to know that list. You need to know the order. It's a circle. It's a loop. We could start anywhere in that circle, but you need to know the circle. All right, this is a good picture to look at. Remember, our heart is actually two hearts in one. It's two circuits. The left side of your heart is called the systemic circuit, because where does it plump blood to? Everywhere, your whole body system. And it's pumping what kind of blood? Oxygen rich. The right side of your heart is called the pulmonary circuit, because it only pumps blood to where? The lungs. And it's pumping what kind of blood to your lungs? Oxygen poor, deoxygenated blood. And notice it's showing you the little capillary beds where all the good stuff happens.
What's the last side called?
Left side is called systemic. Just like it's a system with an IC at the end. Systemic. System with an IC. Can amphibians and reptiles have that same setup? They cannot. Only birds and mammals. Only birds and mammals. All right, let's talk about this heart rhythm stuff for a second. Like we said before, your heart is self-stimulating. The cardiac muscles, they make themselves beat. They beat in rhythm. You guys have probably all seen Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. That seen that movie? Where the guy reaches into the guy's chest and rips out his heart, and it's still beating in the guy's hand. If Micah had been a really bad student today, and I just reached up and just ripped it out, would his heart continue to beat in my hand?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it would. Okay? Until it runs out of oxygen and nutrients, it will continue to beat right there in your hand. Okay? So that part is fairly realistic. But here's the thing. In the wall of your right atrium is where you would find your body's natural pacemaker. It's called the SA node. That's the scientific name for it. SA node, it's in your body's right atrium. So it's sitting somewhere over in here. The right atrium. Sinoatrial. You don't really even need to know that right now. Just sinus. Sinus is like a cavity. So it's in a cavity in the atrium. But this is the part of your heart that sets the rate and the timing at which the muscles will beat. What kind of junction connects this cardiac muscle cell to the one beside it? Called the gap junction. In the heart, those gap junctions are sometimes specifically called what? Gap junctions can be anywhere in your body, in an animal. But in the heart, they've got their own little specific name. They're called intercalated discs. So those let the heart cells communicate with each other. They're a type of communicating junction. Very important that your heart cells communicate so they all beat at the same time. All right, this SA node generates electrical impulses. It's basically shocking your heart at a certain beat. It's like the drummer of your heart, right? It keeps the whole band in tune. It's setting the beat. Setting the beat. The impulses from the SA node spread very rapidly through both atria, right and left atrium. And they make them contract at the same time. Do you want all 4 chambers of your heart contracting at the same time? No, you want the top 2 to contract. And when the top 2 chambers contract, they're going to push the blood down, right? From top to bottom. So those need to contract first. And that's what we're saying happens here. That's why the pacemaker is in the top. Want the top to contract first. Those impulses then travel, after they've made the top, the 2 atria contract, they travel to what's called the AV node. And that's, what do you think AV might stand for? Atrioventricular, which means it's between what? The atria and the ventricles. Atrioventricular, it's between them. You don't really even need to know that. There's no AV node. But it's between the 2. It's between the top and the bottom. Its job is to delay the signal. Because electricity moves really fast, right? And if it moved too fast, before these top chambers finished contracting, what would the bottom ones already do? They'd be contracting, the blood would just get shot back up, right?
Can they get messed up?
Yes, they can get messed up. That's why some people have to get an artificial pacemaker put in. So this AV node puts in a delay so that before the bottom starts to contract, the top is finished. So once that delay happens, the impulses travel on down to the ventricles, and then both ventricles will contract at the same time. So the pacemaker's in the right atrium. It sends out a signal. The 2 top chambers of the atria contract simultaneously. That signal continues to this place called the AV node, which slows it down a little bit, delays it. Then it continues to travel on down to both ventricles, where it will cause those 2 ventricles to contract at the same time. And then it's time to do what? Start it over, right? Top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, over and over again, right? Top, bottom. So that's basically the way your heart rhythm works. The wires that transmit this signal through your heart, they're called Purkinje fibers. It's a term you probably really don't need to know for the AP exam. But just in case, these are just the fibers that carry that impulse through your heart. It's like the wire for your electrical signal. So again, pacemaker sends out a signal. It stimulates both atria to contract at the same time. That signal continues on down to the AV node, which slows it down, stalls it a little bit. Then it travels on down to both ventricles. They contract simultaneously. And then it's time for the next beat, and the next beat, and the next beat, and the next beat. All right, the last couple things I'll mention here are some other kinds of circulatory systems. Non-human circulatory systems. And invertebrates. Things like cnidarians. What are cnidarians, by the way? No? Jellyfish. Flatworms, like a tapeworm. What's the phylum name for the flatworms, by the way? Platyhelminthes. Those guys don't have a circulatory system. No heart, no blood vessels. They are reliant on diffusion. Now, they do have what's called the gastrovascular cavity, which is basically their digestive system acts sort of as a primitive way. Gastrovascular. Yeah, well, gastro means stomach, vascular means vessels, like blood vessels, right? Like, remember vascular system with plants yesterday, right? So their digestive system sort of acts like a circulatory system. And it can, when their stomach contracts, that's sort of like what? A heart contracting to some extent. Their digestive fluids sort of act as a circulatory system. Very primitive though. Echinoderms. What are echinoderms? What's an example of an echinoderm? Starfish, sea urchin, sea cucumber. They have this system of water tubes inside their body called the water vascular system. And that system of water tubes acts somewhat like a circulatory system. It helps to move around gases and nutrients and such. Remember, we have double circulation. Pulmonary circuit on which side? The right side of our heart, pumping blood to the lungs. Systemic circuit on the left, pumping blood to where? Systemic circuit, the whole body. That's the way mammals do it. That's the way birds do it. 4-chambered hearts. High amount of oxygen getting to all your tissues. High oxygen means high what? High cell respiration rates, which means high amounts of ATP. Reptiles have a 3-chambered heart, but it's almost divided in 4. This septum right here almost goes all the way down, which cuts back on what? The mixing. It doesn't get as mixed as it does in amphibians. Amphibians just have 3 chambers, fish 2. That's the same pattern as the pattern of what? Fish, amphibian, reptile, bird, mammal. It's an evolution pattern, right? We see in the fossil record. There we can see 4-chambered heart completely separated, 3-chambered heart mixes, and there's the fish's 2-chambered heart. Just blood vessels. This is the trachea right here. It's mostly just blood vessels. And then a little bit about the blood. We'll end with this, I guess. We talked about most of this before. Your red blood cells are called your erythrocytes. That's a scientific name. Your red blood cells have what protein in them? Hemoglobin. Heme means what? Iron containing, right? That's what carries oxygen in the body. What genetic disease is a deformation of hemoglobin? Sickle cell anemia, right? Your leukocytes. Leuko means white. Those are your white blood cells. Your immune system cells. And then the last thing I'll mention today, thrombocytes. Sometimes they're called platelets. A thrombus is a what? Clot. So these help to start clotting. Platelets are actually little fragments of cells that help to start a clot. They're not the only thing that causes clots, but they help to start the clots. Platelets, thrombocytes.